Hello St Nicholas Church family, it's wonderful to be with you here this morning, sharing the all-age spot. This morning we're going to be thinking about a parable, that's a story that Jesus tells, that talks about how there are two ways to live. The first way is to build your life on Jesus. It's to say that Jesus is in charge, that he knows what's best, that Jesus is the boss. And that the second way is to not build your life on Jesus, to build it on something else. It's to say, I'm in charge. I know what's best. I am the boss. So we're going to look at this Bible passage. If you want to look at it yourself while we do it, it's Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27. Let me read it out. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose and the wind blew and beat against that house. And yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who builds his house on sand. The rain came, the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. Jesus uses the picture of two men building houses to show what happens if you do build your life on Jesus, and what happens if you don't. Let's have a practical demonstration of that. It's going to come up next to me, of what that might look like. This is a really fun activity. You might want to do it later as a family. So here we are going now. On one side, we have the man who has heard the words of Jesus and then put them into practice. He says, Jesus is in charge. Jesus knows what's best. Jesus is the boss. And Jesus says that's like building your house on a rock. When the rain came down, the streams rose and wind blew, and the house did not fall down. It had its foundation on the rock. This man had his foundation on Jesus. Now, on the other side, we have the man who has heard the words of Jesus, but he ignores them. He says, I'm in charge. I know what's best. I am the boss. And Jesus says that's a bit like building your house on sand. When the rain came down and the streams rose and the wind blew, it fell with a crash. The man had rejected Jesus as his foundation, and he faced judgment and condemnation because of that. This parable from Jesus is a call to build our lives on him as the only sure thing, the only solid rock who we can really rely on, and who knows us best and loves us best. And what might that look like for you this week? Perhaps you want to talk this through as a family after the all-age spot. But for now, here are some examples that might help. Well, maybe you are at school and you're asked by a friend to do something that you know is wrong. That's a tricky situation to be in. Well, building your life on Jesus would mean saying no to that and trusting that Jesus' way is the best way, and that he will help you in that conversation with your friend in not doing that thing, even if it feels really hard. Or maybe it's that you're at home at the moment and maybe you're just fighting quite a lot with your siblings over a particular toy, a favourite thing. Well, building your life on Jesus would mean remembering that he calls us to be generous and kind and to put others before ourselves. It means sharing with our siblings. It means asking Jesus to help us to do that, even when it feels hard. Today, as we think about this parable, as we remember what Jesus has told us about the wise man and the foolish man, let's remember that Jesus is in charge. Jesus knows what's best, and Jesus is the boss. We're going to sing about that now.
The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. And the rain came rain came down and the floods came up, and the house on the rock stood firm. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand, and the rain came tumbling down. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up, and the house on the sand fell flat. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rain came tumbling down. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up, and the house on the rock stood firm.